So this week I want to do something different from what I've done before. Uh, Simply because the most important person in my whole life in music passed away this week. Of course, talking about Eddie Van Halen. No other person in my whole life has meant more and done more for me um, for the past 42 years since the first Van Halen album came out in 1978. My best friend growing up called me and said, you need to come over right now. His big brother had bought the album, and I got on my bicycle and I rode over as quick as I could because I got a feeling that something special was going to happen. So we went down in the basement and we listened to the album, and it was like an alien had landed and brought atomic bombs and changed history forever. We listened to the album, I think, like 3 times, hardly even speaking. We were so blown away. I just remember, standing up and going like, I need to go home. And I got home, and I was 10 years old at the time. I took my guitar and I just put it away. I felt like I should focus on tennis and sports. That should be my thing, not music. And I was a pretty mature kid even at 10. So it was like, nah, there's no way. Because before that I was a huge Kiss fan, and I'm still a huge Kiss fan, but the way that Ace Frehley played was at least within the limits of something that you could think, yeah, I might learn how to play that. But when you heard Eddie do Eruption, it was just game over. The way he played it, the guitar sound. 42 years later, we're still trying to figure out the magic behind that brown sound, the tone, the way that Eddie played, and everything that went on. And we still don't know how. I mean, a lot of people can copy him pretty good, but nobody can do it the way Eddie did. It took me 3 weeks to bring out the guitar again, and I said to myself, okay, I'm 10 years old. If I practice 5 or 10 hours a day for maybe 10 years, maybe I will be good enough to not play that good, but at least good enough so I can maybe at least do an album. And so that was the start. That was the motivation for me to get into this insane world of every minute awake. I needed to have a guitar in my hand and play and play and play. And Eddie and the band Van Halen, the way they wrote songs, the way they sounded together, the joy in the way that they played together. It was just the whole start for me as a musician. So when I read the news from Eddie's son Wolfgang on his Instagram, it shocked me so much that I know I read it and I couldn't take the information in. So I went on Google and I looked for a confirmation, because sometimes people get killed by internet and it's not true. And because I couldn't believe what I read. So I went on Google to get it confirmed. And that's when it hit me that this is Wolfgang posting this. It shocked me so bad. It stunned me that I shut off the whole world, and it was like losing a family member. I mean, millions of people around the world, we all felt this this gigantic sadness. Of course, mainly I think about the family. What they're going through. I've lost my dad 20 years ago, so I know the horrible feeling of losing a parent. But Eddie felt, for 42 years, he felt like family to me as well, because he was that important. Even when I was, I think, around 11 or 12, at the school event, they asked me to go up and play guitar. And I went up and I played, not Eruption or anything, but I played a tribute to Eddie. Well, I was a kid, as you can tell, but Eddie meant the world to me. Everything I did, I wanted to be as close as I could to Eddie, like all of us wanted to be. So in the early years, in the 80s, I started getting into the studio world, recording demos mostly for people until I got my first record deal. And I started getting noticed in the magazines, music magazines and newspapers, as this talented little kid who could play like Van Halen. That was the thing that they often talked about. So when Eddie played on Michael Jackson's Thriller album, on Beat It, it became a thing where a lot of pop artists wanted a hard rock guitar solo on their recordings. So my first session work I ever did was actually running around studios in Stockholm where, they wanted me to do the Van Halen kind of Beat It solo, which was a pretty cool way to start in my studio career. My whole start, everything that I am, everything I've done, it's all because of Eddie. Nobody else. I mean, I have a ton of influences in my playing, in my writing, and everything I do. But nobody has ever been more important than Eddie Van Halen. So losing him was a shock. The greatest part about him for me was not the solos, even though the early albums for me have some of the coolest rock solos in the history ever. But it was actually his rhythm playing, the way he played rhythm with that fantastic groove and unique style. The whole band had that vibe, that sound together. It was fantastic. So it was the whole package, but also the fact for every new album he came up with something that none of us had heard before. The way he played an acoustic guitar on Spanish Fly on the second album, or Cathedral, the way he used delays and the volume knob and the slap guitar intro thing to Mean Streets. It was just every album you knew there was going to be something that you never heard before, and he kept doing this over and over. And the way that he changed the whole setup of a guitar. I mean, we're all living under the legacy of Eddie Van Halen, all of us who play guitar. And of course his legacy will live on forever, thankfully. But I got a couple of cool stories about meeting him and moving to LA and some other stuff. So I want to share some of that and show you some pictures. I've kept some of these pictures for myself over the years, so I think this is the perfect time to show them here in this video. One of the greatest memories I have of anything at all in my life happened in 1984 when I was 16 years old. And Sunday, August the 19th, my dear friend Anders Tegner, famous journalist and author in Sweden, he called me up and he knew what a die-hard Van Halen fan I was. I was 16 years old, and Van Halen were playing in Stockholm a week later, at the Monsters of Rock Festival together with AC/DC and Motley Crue. So he calls me up and says, nobody knows about this, but Van Halen are actually coming into town tonight, and I know which hotel they're going to stay at. And I thought, you of all people would like this information. So I freaked out. I got on the train from the little town that I live, about 30-40 minutes outside of Stockholm. Beautiful summer evening. I went into town. I went to the hotel right in the heart of Stockholm, and very few people there. So I walked into the hotel. Nobody in the lobby cared, and I looked outside at the patio, and I saw Michael Anthony and his bass tech Kevin Dugan. And I had brought a copy of the rock magazine Circus with me in case I would meet them, so I can get an autograph, and also the 1984 album on vinyl. I walked out very slowly and very shy to see if I could get Michael Anthony to sign this, and very slowly I walked up and he looked at me and like, what do you want? So I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but like, is it possible that you could sign this for me? And he just screamed at me and said, fuck no, and scared the shit out of me. And I was just about to turn around and walk away when he started laughing. He said, but you can actually join us for a beer. And I was like really stunned. I was like, really? Yeah, come on. So he grabbed a chair and sat down, and they actually bought me a beer. And basically we're like, so who are you? Tell us about Stockholm. So we just ended up having a great time, and they told me that Eddie and Alex were going to come the day after. They had been to Holland to visit their relatives down there. I also met Eddie's guitar tech, Rudy, who said, they're coming tomorrow. I'll introduce you to Eddie, and so on. So amazing evening. I went back home and felt like I already won the lotto. So got back early the day after and met Kevin and Rudy, and they said Eddie and Alex are going to be around noon. So I was waiting inside the hotel. I was already introduced to the people at the hotel, and they were fine with me being there. So, and true enough, around noon, Eddie came with Alex, and Eddie had his stunning wife, Valerie Bertinelli, with him, which was a surprise by itself. Also, she was adorable and such a sweet person. A couple of fans had heard about them coming, so they were actually standing outside trying to get an autograph, and they signed some stuff, walked into the hotel, and the first thing Eddie did was he saw a piano. So he actually just went straight to the piano and sat there and played for like 5 or 10 minutes with just me standing there. And I'm like, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to breathe, just standing there watching Eddie playing a piano. And then I got introduced to them, and we ended up again spending the rest of the day together, having a couple of beers and just a great time. And they wanted to know about Stockholm, and the wives wanted to know about shopping and this and that. I said, okay, I'll show you around where you can go shopping, and the guys in the band wanted to go golfing, so I spoke to the people in the lobby and managed to get the golf court booked for them and stuff, and they got a van that and they were like, you want to join us? And I said, I don't play golf. And they said, oh, never mind, hey, you just tag along, have fun. So I ended up spending 6 whole days with Alex and Eddie and Michael, and sometimes wives as well, and I think they appreciated also a lot that I even cared about helping the wives with shopping, and I wasn't just a fan there. They liked me. They thought it was cool to have me around. So for me, it was a dream like no other dream that you can have as a kid. I was a die-hard fan of Van Halen. It's 1984. And you're in the middle of all of this. It's like you're dreaming and you never want to wake up. They brought me along for everything. During that week, there was a big party with AC/DC and Motley Crue. The 3 bands were playing at the Monsters of Rock, and they were like, well, you're coming with us. So they took me to that party. I ended up spending most of the evening with the guys in Motley Crue. I actually got to know a couple of them really well, and when I moved to LA a few years later, we we kept in touch. I actually lived next door to Vince Neil for a few years, which was kind of cool. And I also spent some time with AC/DC and especially Angus Young, which was kind of cool. They were like super cool people, and again, it was just a larger than life kind of dream being there. More and more, I started hanging with Eddie's guitar tech Rudy and Michael's bass tech Kevin, that I'm still friends with on Facebook, and Rudy, he really got what kind of fan I was and the fact that I was a guitar player. So he and Eddie talked about me a lot, and right before, I think it was the Thursday or Friday, they were playing Saturday. Rudy I think it was the Thursday. Rudy came to me and he said, "I have a surprise for you, and it's a pretty cool one." And I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "Eddie wants to jam with you if you want tomorrow up in the room, in his hotel room." And I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, so we're gonna bring a couple of guitars and amps to the room so you guys can jam if you want." I'm like, holy shit. And then he says, "And Eddie has decided that he wants to give you a guitar." And my heart stopped. I mean, truly just stopped. It was like, this is too much to handle for me. So I freaked out. When I got home that night, I couldn't even sleep. I was up all night. It was too freaky. So when I got back the day after on the Friday, and I met the guys again, Rudy said, "Well, I've sent out a note to the crew that because Eddie always brings a bunch of bodies and necks and pickups and a floor drills and stuff. So if he feels like he can actually put a guitar together, because he was always, doing stuff like this with his guitar. So he said he wants to put a guitar together and just paint it and give it to you." So I think they went away. I don't know if they did a sound check that day or they went away to do something, and we were gonna meet up in the evening. So when they got back, Rudy said, I don't even know how to tell you this, but I got a word back from the crew that because we're playing tomorrow and it's a festival, they had already packed everything in the cases and they're already in the buses. I can't access anything. Eddie can't get the parts to build you a guitar, and also it means I only have one guitar in the room, hotel room, that I managed to get, and a small little amp for him. So you guys can, Eddie still wants to meet you and you can play, but you can't really jam together. And I'm like, of course, heartbroken, but it was still too weird, the whole thing of getting a guitar from Eddie. So we actually ended up that evening going to his room and just sitting there with his famous guitar, and he gave it to me, and I was too shy to really play something. I'm 60 and I was a decent player, but I played a little bit, but I gave it back to him, and he started playing some stuff, and he said, "So what do you want to hear? What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Would you play Eruption for me?" And he went, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because this is before internet. I haven't even seen a video of what does it look like. What does your fingers look like when you play this?" So he laughed a little bit, and he played me most of the stuff from it, the way that he would do his live solo. He played most of the stuff, and I was just sitting there in awe, going like, this is unreal. So we had a great time that evening, and also on the Friday, Eddie did an interview with a Swedish pop magazine, and also for radio. The same interview was used for radio, and they actually did an interview before we were sort of jamming up in the room, and the guy interviewed Ed, who interviewed Eddie, said, have you heard any Swedish guitar players? Have you met any Swedish guitar players? And Eddie said, "Well, we've had this kid here, Tommy, the week, during this weekend," and he was like, "Is he good?" Because he never heard me before that. And the guy said, "Yeah, no, he's really talented. He actually learned how to play Eruption, and I could do a decent version, but not a perfect one." And that night we played in the room, but I was a shy kid, of course. But I actually ended up hearing that interview on radio sometime after, and just to hear Eddie talking about me on the radio and to see that thing in the biggest pop magazine was truly surreal. And of course the show, the Monsters of Rock show, was fantastic. Motley Crue killed. Van Halen were amazing. AC/DC were just stunning. It was one of the best concerts I ever saw growing up. So when we were done in Stockholm, Eddie said, if you ever come to LA, look me up, get in touch through Rudy or Kevin or anyone, and we'll hang in LA. And 3 years later, I ended up moving to LA, and it never really crossed my mind to start reaching out to these people to try and meet Eddie right away. I was just excited to be there, and I ended up meeting him anyway at the NAMM show and at a couple of private events pretty soon after I moved there. And 3 years had passed, and which is a long time for a rock star of that dignity. So I wasn't even sure if he was going to remember me. So I very politely asked him, hi, I don't know if you remember me from Stockholm. And he looked at me and he went, wait a minute, whoa, you're the guy from the hotel. Yeah, I'm Tommy. So that, we spent some time in LA together. That was pretty cool. Not a lot, but I got to see him jam at the famous Baked Potato Club, small little events like that, and at the NAMM show a couple of times. And I also got to see a really cool bigger jam, also at the NAMM show, but with Billy Idol and Whistle Zappa and the guys from Bon Jovi and some other people. And it was an amazing evening. Everyone played, did their thing, and then they brought up Eddie in the end for a few songs, and it was truly like the Pope arriving in Rome. And you could just tell how everyone was like so scared and excited and happy that Eddie was playing with them. And I got to take some pictures on my little camera that I've never shown to anyone. So quickly after I moved to LA, I became very, very good friends with Dave White, the man who worked at the Guitar Center in Hollywood. He's to this day one of my favorite people on this planet. And he and famous photographer Robert Knight were in charge of the rock walk outside the Guitar Center, where all the famous rock stars had made their handprints and stuff. And of course Van Halen were part of that. And they also got some of the world's most famous guitars from Jeff Beck and so on. They actually had, I think, 3 guitars from Eddie. And at one point I asked Dave if it was possible that they would actually bring that guitar out, and even the black and yellow one that they had, so I could try it, because I remember the one, I think it might even be that one that Eddie played in Stockholm in '84. It looks exactly the same. I know he had a couple of them, the Kramer ones that he put together like that. And he said, sure, no problem. He called him one of the guards and went down and opened up the big glass cases and took the guitars out, and we walked down into the amp room, plugged them in, and I actually got to play these guitars. And over the years, I got to play the red and white one in Dave's office many times, and it was just an amazing guitar. It's so unique, it's so lightweight, it's such a cool energy in it. It's Eddie's energy in it. It's still his strings on it, and a guitar that he's really played, and it just feels really cool to play it. And also at one time I was eating lunch with Dave at a place next door called Chibo's, next door to Guitar Center, and we ran into Alex Van Halen and Josh Freese, another amazing drummer that I've actually ended up recording on a few cool albums with. So we sort of had lunch, everyone together, and had a fun time. And I went to the NAMM show almost every year for maybe 20 years, and Michael Anthony would always be there. And together with Kevin, I would always run into them. And a couple of years, 3 years ago, I think it is, I got to co-produce and work on an album for Alice Cooper, the Paranormal album. And during that process, he invited me to play with him and the Hollywood Vampires at his big Christmas gala in Phoenix. And that year, Sammy Hagar was one of the special guests. So I ended up spending 10, 12 hours with everyone that was there. Johnny Depp and Joe Perry and everyone in the Hollywood Vampires, but also Sammy Hagar and Korn and some other people. And we all ended up in a big jam in the end and everything. So just being around all of these people have been incredible. I'm not starstruck with any people after the career that I have, but anytime I'm around anyone in Van Halen, I still become that little 16-year-old kid that met them in 84 and the 10-year-old kid that heard the first album. In my book, there will never ever be a better band. There will never be a better guitar player in the history of music than Eddie Van Halen. And I owe him everything, so I had to do a video to pay my respect to the one guy who made my whole life the way it is. I'm 52 years old now. I was 10 years old when I heard the first album, and it's gonna take me a really, really long time to feel okay with the fact that Eddie's not here with us anymore. And we should all just play Van Halen music every day for a long time and celebrate the legacy of this brilliant man and everything he did. And I'll be back soon with more videos with music and other stuff. So I just had to do this one for Eddie. So thank you for listening. See you soon.